Thanks to Indeed for supporting the Productivity Show. Right now, small businesses have to be more efficient than ever. Every hire is critical. Indeed is the #1 job site in the world, and you can get a $75 credit at Indeed.com/TPS. Terms and conditions apply. Offer is valid through September 30th. Thanks also to Fiverr for supporting the Productivity Show. It's so easy to find freelance talent for your business or product. Don't waste any more time. Get 10% off and the service you deserve by going to fiverr.com and use code TPS. Welcome to the Productivity Show, a podcast by Asian Efficiency to help you maximize your productivity so you can get everything done without having to sacrifice your health, family, and things that matter to you. We've helped tens of thousands of people save time, be happier, and become more productive. In this episode, I'm super excited to introduce Tim Stringer to the Productivity Show. Tim's a professionally trained coach, productivity expert, and an accomplished yoga and meditation teacher. He's the founder of Technically Simple and LearnOmniFocus. As you can imagine, we cover a wide range of topics like how to best use a task manager for personal tasks, professional tasks, and team projects. We also talk about what type of task to put where, and how a serious health issue led him to develop an approach he calls holistic productivity. You can find links to everything that we share in the show notes by going to theproductivityshow.com/296. And now, on with the show. All right, so my name is Brooks. I'm the operations director here at Asian Efficiency, one of the hosts of the Productivity Show. This time, really thankful to be joined by a guest. So no Tam this time. Instead, I have Tim Stringer here. And Tim, I've already listed a little bit about you, but it's always best to hear in your own words about yourself. So maybe you could tell us who you are, what you do, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Brooks. And it's great to be on the Productivity Show. I'm definitely an avid listener for many years now, so happy to be adding my voice. And my background and work really is multifaceted. I come from an engineering background and worked in the corporate world for about 13 years before venturing off on my own. Worked as everything from a software developer doing low-level software development to a project manager on some very large projects. There were some challenging times, some very happy memories from that time, and I definitely got a lot of great experience, a lot of insights into what life was like in the corporate world. And then in 2003, I decided it was time to venture off on my own, and I created a company called Technically Simple. And the essence of Technically Simple was back then, and still is to this day, to support people and organizations in making effective use of technology. I've always seen technology as something that can actually improve our quality of life at many levels. And too often I've also seen it as something that adds stress to life. And I've been always very motivated to share some very, very practical ways that people can have technology work for them and enhance all aspects of their life and work. And that's morphed over the years. I went through a major health crisis in 2008 when I was diagnosed with a very advanced form of cancer. And that's ironically was kind of the best thing that ever happened to me rolled into the worst thing that ever happened to me all at once. And that's really what's led to the specific work that I'm doing today. I actually use David Allen's Getting Things Done as part of my healing process. And that led me to start doing productivity courses. And I latched on to OmniFocus. I know we'll be talking about that not long after that. And now I have a major focus of my work is around productivity, both at the personal level and at the team level.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that it's multifaceted because while this episode is nominally about task managers, I can definitely see it going all over the place. So I'm sure we have a lot of other things to talk about, which we'll get into. You were mentioning you are a Productivity Show listener. I actually looked to see, when's the last time we had Tim on the show? And I could not believe that this is the first time you've been on the Productivity Show. This is a complete outrage. So I'm glad we finally rectified that. So
yeah, definitely better late than never.
Yeah, apologies for waiting 296 episodes, but I'm sure this won't be the last time.
Give me a lot of time to prepare.
There you go. All right. So regular listeners will know we always like to start our episode with our top 3 resources. So these are 3 things that we're loving these days, or that is making us more productive, or just that is helping us out in some way. Usually Tan and I share our resources, but when we have a guest, we like to hear a different voice if possible. So Tim, thank you so much. I know you have 3 resources you want to share. So maybe you can take us through just quickly through your top 3 resources right now.
Yeah, sure. So I've got a book, an app, and a tool to share. The book is a fairly recent one. It's written by one of our fellow British Columbians, Paul Jarvis, and the book is called Company of One. And one thing I really loved about this work is it kind of challenges the notion that you need to keep growing and growing as an organization. And I think sometimes smaller is better instead of bigger is better. And there's a lot to be said for conscious growth and being aware of sort of the temptation to grow just for the sake of growing. So, or even though the book is called Company of One, it's one I recommend, even if you're part of a company of 100. But it's really about, I think, finding that sweet spot and doing work that really supports a lifestyle that supports you and your relationships and things like that. So that's a real gem of a book. I'm not sure where it fits into my system yet, but it's definitely caught my attention is Notion. And Notion to me almost feels, when I first started using it, it felt a bit like Dropbox paper, where you could basically create a document and start adding tables and checkboxes and things to it. And so I see it as a nice kind of bridge between something that's highly structured, like something like Airtable or Asana that's by nature structured, and something like Google Docs, which is by nature unstructured. So this is kind of a nice play between those two. And I've been experimenting using it for some specific things, and not sure where it's going to go from here, but really impressed with the product that they put together. And then the hardware tool, one that I got, I guess probably about 6 months ago, is a Stream Deck. And if you haven't seen a Stream Deck, it's basically a keyboard, but you can decide what images go on all the buttons, even dynamically, and you can decide what all the buttons do. And so I found this especially helpful I do a lot of online Zoom sessions. And if you've ever led one of these, especially with a large group of people, there's a lot to keep track of, and chat boxes and turning video feeds and screen sharing on and off. So having all of those functions programmed into my Stream Deck and being able to just click on a button and easily identify it through a visual icon, not having to think about keyboard shortcuts and things in that moment, has been a real efficiency, and I think just taking the pressure off in general.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the Stream Deck. I don't have one, but I've kind of been lusting after them since I know you were recently on an episode of The Automators, which is a great podcast about automation. And I will drop a link to all of this stuff that Tim just mentioned, and the podcast episodes in the show notes, theproductivityshow.com/296. But when you were describing how you use it, and the hosts of The Automators use them as well. And I know it also integrates with Keyboard Maestro, right? So if you have macros on your Mac and things that you do, you can actually just execute them by just hitting a button on your desk.
Yeah,
which seems awesome.
Yeah, and they've even taken that a step further with Keyboard Maestro, which is another one of my favorite apps. So you can have a button be assigned to a Keyboard Maestro macro, but you can also have macros actually change the icons on buttons. So you could have something like a status displaying on the button you just clicked, or it could change, the icon could change depending on what happened within Keyboard Maestro. So in some ways, I feel like I'm still kind of scratching the surface with what's possible with this. But it is, definitely a fascinating device. There is an app version as well. I haven't used it yet, but you can actually run it on an iPhone and access, I think it's essentially the same functionality. So if somebody wants to just try it out, and that can be a great way to go.
Sometimes we have podcast episodes that cost me money, and I think this is going to be one of those episodes.
Apologies in advance.
Yeah, and if you're interested in learning more about Notion, we actually recorded a podcast with Francesco D'Alessio, who is a friend of the show. I'm sure you know him too.
Yeah. I think he's kind of the poster child for Notion these days.
So we talked about that quite a bit. It was TPS 273. So if you want to learn more about Notion, you can check that out as well. All right, thank you so much for those resources. And We are going to be talking mostly, again, I'm sure it'll go other places, but mostly about task managers. And so if you are somebody who is new to managing your tasks, you're not really sure what to use, we'll give you some ideas and share some of the tools that we use. If you're somebody who uses a personal task manager and maybe you're now working with a team and you're trying to navigate that space between what are your tasks and what are shared tasks and where should everything go. Tim is an expert on that, so we're going to be talking about that. And also, even if you feel like you have this stuff nailed down, you're already a productivity ninja, you have your task managers going, I guarantee that Tim is going to share some tips and has some insights and things you probably haven't thought about. So yeah, we're going to get into that. And I just want to start with taking a step back and this concept of task managers, because sometimes we talk to people. I should have mentioned this at the start. Tim and I both live in Vancouver, so we bumped into each other at the friend of the show, Mike Vardy's from productivityist.com, the Big Ready event that he had in downtown Vancouver a few weeks ago. So you've got between that and Tim's book, you have a very British Columbia content this time. So apologies if we throw in some extra A's and add some U's to our word. But, sometimes you talk to people at events or family members and they feel like, I don't need a task manager, right? I can just jot things down on a sticky note. I can keep everything in my head. What do you do when somebody says something like that? How do you kind of convince them? If you do, maybe you don't, but if you do, how do you kind of sell the concept of task managers in general?
Well, this is where I take a page out of David Allen's book and remind those people that they probably have a calendar where they keep all their appointments and ask them what life would be like without their calendar. And they usually sort of say, oh, no, it wouldn't work at all. And they say, well, if you're keeping your appointments in your calendar, why not keep your commitments and things you need to do in a system that's externalized? And I think for some people that can be pen and paper. There's definitely people who really thrive with that, especially if they're not necessarily particularly drawn to the technology aspect of it. And that might be their ultimate solution, or that might be kind of what gets them in the door and creates the curiosity to go further. But it's ultimately, I think, about speaking to the pain points, like just, asking them, what's on your mind right now? Or, is there anything that slipped through the cracks today or last week or anything like that? And inevitably there are going to be things. And then using some sort of a task management system gets presented as a solution, something that's going to take pressure off of them versus something that they quote unquote should be using, because everybody else is using one. I think there needs to be that strong incentive that's there.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. So it's not really selling the concept of task managers per se. It's reminding all of us that, there probably is that thing that you wanted to do last week, but you didn't get to it or you forgot about it. How can we solve that issue? I like that approach. That's good.
Yeah, it's really painting a picture of what life could be like with a task manager in place, I think. And once they're kind of enrolled in that vision of the future, then it's, I think, a very natural conversation to say, okay, how do I get there?
So you mentioned pen and paper. Do you have any preference or opinion or anything like that on analog task management? A lot of people use, say, a bullet journal or carry around a field notes notebook or something like that. Are you a pen and paper guy? Or are you all digital or kind of somewhere in between?
I'd say I'm about 95% digital. I just love the technology. I'm very comfortable with it. It's definitely tied to the work that I do, so I'm always experimenting with different apps and ways of doing things. So I'm very much in that digital realm, and I like the ubiquitous nature of technology, where I can take a note on something on my Mac and pick up my iPhone and have easy access to it. Having said that, there are times where it just feels good to grab a piece of paper and start doodling. And at the conference you mentioned, I decided I was going to try taking paper notes. I normally would be typing on my iPad instead. And it was actually kind of liberating to just put things down onto paper. And I think I might continue to do that at some future conferences, because I do feel sometimes I'm a little constrained by the technology if I want to just sketch something out or maybe do more of a graphical sort of representation of what I'm learning from the event. So that's still a little bit of a work in progress. So I think there's a place for both. The beauty of pen and paper is there's nothing getting in the way. There's no batteries running out. There's no kind of structure that's imposed by that piece of paper in front of you in general. So it can be very freeing, can put us into a very creative mode, I think. And technology tends to impose a bit more of a structure, and that can be very useful in its own right. So the best tool for the job, I guess, at the end of the day.
Do you ever? Yeah, exactly. Well, it's good that you mentioned that you are very comfortable with the digital, so it kind of makes sense for you. I think a mistake some people make is, say, if they're not comfortable with technology, at least right now, they're maybe on their journey of learning, they try to go from zero to creating keyboard maestro macros because they read it on a blog or something like that. It's usually a better approach to do what you're comfortable with, get a system working, and then kind of extend it from there versus trying to go jump into something where you're lost right from the get-go.
Yeah, just start with the low-hanging fruit. Do something that produces a positive result. It's going to motivate further progress, and just build on that. And again, there needs to be the trust in whatever system is there. That's something David Allen references a lot as well. And if people trust their notebook or the pad of paper in front of them much more than they do their technology, then that's a great place to start. But if someone is adept with the technology and know it's getting backed up and things are going to get taken care of, then that can work really well.
Do you do anything with the Apple Pencil and the iPad, any of that type of stuff? Or are you more like a typing into a device sort of person?
I'm more of a typer. I do have a 12.9-inch iPad Pro, and I do enjoy doing a bit of doodling with the pencil, and it does kind of create that bridge between the technology and pen and paper in a sense. So I'm definitely very curious about that. I think one of the reasons I type so much is I can type much more quickly than I can write. So it's just that sort of speed of input. I think one input method that's often kind of forgotten about is dictation as well. And devices have gotten, even just with the built-in dictation capability, have gotten much, much better over the years. And I find I use that more and more. It's just even if I'm searching for something, instead of typing the search, I'll just hit the little microphone on my iPhone and start dictating. And that can be a real time saver. And it, again, puts us, I think all of these put us into a different sort of state of mind when we're speaking versus when we're writing on a piece of paper versus when we're typing. They're engaging different parts of the brain and different parts of our creativity.
So you mentioned you're mostly digital, I think, and this is something I promised at the start of the episode. So when you are keeping track of tasks, capturing information, that sort of thing, what do you use? What task managers do you use, and kind of what do you use them for?
Yeah, sure. So if I'm capturing something that's defined as a task, or it might even end up being a project, that goes into OmniFocus. And if I'm sort of in a bit of that ambiguous state where there's a thought that's come to my mind, I need to think about it, decide if I'm even going to do something about it, so forth. I'll often put that into the Drafts app first. And Drafts is kind of like the digital equivalent of a pad of paper where you can make some notes and then tear off a new page and make some more notes and so forth without that pressure of, what do I need to do with this thing? So if it's something very specific, like just before we started recording, I quickly added to OmniFocus to added an action to send you a copy of the recording that I'm making on my side. So that's very actionable. I want that in OmniFocus. If I were walking out in the beautiful sunny weather we're having today and just had a random thought, that's what I would tend to put into Drafts. And then later that day, I'd go back and say, is this something I want to just kind of capture in one of my idea banks, or is this something I want to take action on? Those sorts of things. So I think the key to having a system that works is to be able to capture in such a way that doesn't overload the system, and at the same time gives you a very easy way to do something with those things that have captured, even though they might be coming from all over the place.
And so do you work off of OmniFocus when you're going through your tasks? You use OmniFocus and things are there, and that's kind of your dashboard for what you need to do in the day?
Yeah, for sure. So my two main drivers are OmniFocus and the calendar. So we're here talking because there was an appointment on the calendar. Sometimes I'll have some time blocked off to do either a specific project or to do a certain type of task. Maybe you need to spend some time on admin or something like that. And then OmniFocus will give me the list to say what next. And And I might not necessarily be spending much time in OmniFocus. It might direct me off to Asana to review the inbox in there or to add some comments for my web developer or something like that. But I find it's very useful to have one list that steers the attention, even if you're not spending much time looking at that list.
Yeah, and a sunny day in spring in Vancouver is something we should definitely be capturing and taking advantage of because it doesn't happen very often.
Even in the calendar, just even putting some time on there to go for a walk, and because it's so easy for time to get away. And the thing I love about using the calendar alongside OmniFocus is it really kind of grounds, what can I actually get done today? If I'm looking at a list of, 30 possible things, maybe realistically I can only do 15 of those things today and still finish work at 5 p.m. So I think those are two. I see a lot of people overloading their task lists and not really grounding them in reality. So I think using the calendar alongside Task Manager like OmniFocus is really key.
Yeah, I think that is what is a missing piece for a lot of us is we have the task manager and the things we need to do in the day, but there isn't any relationship to the reality of your day. So I like that. I like that concept of kind of using both alongside each other. So you are making space for the stuff that you say you're going to do versus because just looking at a list isn't often reality.
And I think a lot of people get a lot done in a day and then end the day feeling kind of guilty, even though they've been highly productive and maybe focused just because they only did 15 of their 30 items. So, but maybe doing 15 was a major win within itself. And that's all that was, reasonably possible to do in that day.
So you mentioned that sometimes your OmniFocus task will take you off to Asana. I'm going to guess that is something maybe you use for working with others. So A, is that the case? And B, if it is, like maybe you could tell us a little bit about how that all works together for you. Because a lot of times people struggle when they have their own tasks, but then they also have tasks relating to others. So maybe you can share some of the things you do around that.
Yeah, sure. So Asana, one way of looking at Asana, I guess, is when I'm working with other people, it completely replaces email. So instead of me making requests of the other person, them making requests of me, they assign tasks within Asana, and those tasks exist within some sort of a list or a project, something that's moving it towards completion. So that's at the very basic level. So right now, for instance, I'm working on a complete redesign of the LearnOmniFocus website, and I'm working with a web developer in the Vancouver area to do that. And he's got certain tasks on his plate. I've got certain tasks on my plate. And we can both see what each other is doing. And if there's clarification needed around, what do you actually want done in this area, we have those conversations within Asana. So it really contains the project in terms of what needs to be done. Are we on track? Are we falling behind? Those sorts of things. And then is a place where we can keep track of the details on what work needs to be done. And if we were falling a little behind and we needed to bring someone else in, we can bring them right into the project. They can actually see everything that's happened so far. We can assign some tasks to them and so forth. And one thing I think is really important to distinguish is these terms like projects and tasks and actions and things are a little undefined in general. Even the word project can mean a 50-story office building to one person and building a bird feeder to somebody else. So, so I just did a session on LearnOmniFocus recently where I talked about the difference between sort of a standard David Allen type project where it's got a defined action. It's going to take you at least 2 actions to complete as something that's more contained within a relatively small period of time versus a large project that typically involves multiple people or might involve someone getting their PhD or something like that. But it's something that essentially consists of many smaller projects in support of that larger one. So I find something that might be tracked in Asana, for instance, that would be a team project, would be more an example of one of those larger projects. And then the tasks that people assign within Asana, people don't tend to assign discrete tasks like phone books or something like that. They'll say add the revamp tutorial section to the website or something along those lines. So essentially when people talk about tasks they're assigning collaboratively, those tend to be, in my mind, projects. And each of those tasks in Asana could be implemented as a project within OmniFocus. So somebody just gave me some work to do. It's going to take me the rest of the week. I'm going to link that into a project in OmniFocus, and it doesn't have to be OmniFocus. It could be Todoist. It could be things, any sort of personal task manager, and I'm going to work out the details myself, and I'll report back to the group on the progress that I'm making, or I'll just mark it complete once it's done. So it's kind of separating out the different levels from what's the big kind of lofty goal, what are some sort of preliminary steps leading up to that, and what are the discrete actions. It's like I need to email this person or do some research on X, or I need to give somebody a call, whatever it happens to be. But ultimately, I think the system is most useful when I go into OmniFocus in my case and say, what's on my list for today? I've got something very descriptive to say, okay, you need to email the accountant, or you need to process your inbox in Asana. Things that I've already done the thinking ahead of time. I can just go in and action on those things.
Indeed knows it's a cautious time for businesses across America. Uncertainty flavors every decision, and every financial commitment is vetted. And now your next important hire is more crucial than ever. Indeed is here to help. Indeed.com is the #1 job site in the world because Indeed gets you the best people fast. Unlike other sites, Indeed gives you full control and payment flexibility over your hiring. You only pay for what you need, you can pause your account at any time, and there's no long-term contracts. Plus, Indeed provides powerful tools to make your search that much easier. An example is sponsored jobs, which are shown to be 3.5 times more likely to result in a hire. With 73% of online job seekers visiting Indeed each month, Indeed is going to get you the important hire you need, just like they have for over 3 million businesses. Right now, Indeed is offering our listeners a free $75 credit to boost your job post, which means more quality candidates will see it fast. Try Indeed out with a free $75 credit at Indeed.com/TPS. This is their best offer available anywhere. Go right now to Indeed.com/TPS. Terms and conditions apply. Offer is valid through September 30th. All right, let's talk about finding freelance talent for your project or business. Sometimes things just come up. Something changes and you need to meet a new goal, or some sort of obstacle comes up and you know you just can't meet your deadline with your current team. For us, we had a very valuable team member go on maternity leave recently. Super excited for her and her family, hi baby Ulrich, but she had some specialized skills that we needed to fill. Where do you go to find on-demand talent? How much will it cost, and how do you know they'll deliver? Finding the right freelancer can be time-consuming, frustrating, and expensive. Fiverr lets you hire freelancers with proven track records and clear pricing, so you're never in the dark. Whether it's building your first website or designing social graphics to celebrate years of business, Fiverr connects you with the talent you need to keep moving forward. We've used Fiverr for lots of things: web graphics, ad images, Photoshop touch-ups, book covers, even an SEO report. Everything was delivered on time, and it was so nice being able to do everything in one place on Fiverr, and we really appreciated being able to see how they've done on other projects similar to ours. So work with confidence. You can go ahead and search by service, deadline, price, reviews, and more. You'll know exactly what you're paying for upfront, no hourly rates or negotiating. Payments only release to the freelancer once you approve the work, so you're protected. Fiverr has 24/7 customer service. Anytime you have an issue, Fiverr is there to help. Find your talent today at Fiverr.com and receive 10% off your first order using our code TPS. All the digital services you need are in one place at Fiverr.com, code TPS. Again, that's Fiverr.com, code TPS. So we do things very similar in the sense that we use Jira internally at AE. So we use Jira, and issues get kind of assigned around, broken down into subtasks sometimes, but it's usually more bigger picture stuff in Jira. And then the way I personally do it anyway is that I break it down further into OmniFocus for those discrete things that I do. What some people might say though is if you're using Asana for that anyway, why not just break it down and have the tasks in Asana? Like, what's the benefit to you of having, and I'm being devil's advocate here because I do the exact same thing you do,
Yeah,
but
sure, yeah.
what's the benefit of using two systems? Like, doesn't that just create more complication having two places to look for tasks, or what's your thinking there?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the essence of it is that Asana is being used for one aspect of my life and work, whereas OmniFocus is being used for all aspects, from my health to my business to my relationships. And the reality is, and this is probably common with quite a few people, is they probably don't just work with one group of people. They might have their day job, but they might also have a community that they're involved with. They might also be planning their next vacation with their family. So there might be several kind of different systems. Like, for instance, I'm a director of an international yoga retreat that takes place every year, and we use Basecamp to manage that. And so I couldn't be just working out of Asana because I also need to be working out of Basecamp. And so it's kind of making the system as elaborate as you need to, but not making it any more complicated than that. And I have seen people who have actually used Asana as their personal task manager as well. Maybe that's what their company uses, and they say, okay, well, I'm in there anyway. Maybe I'll just do that. And if that works, I'd say definitely go for it. But there's other people who say, well, I associate Asana with work. I want to use something like OmniFocus for other aspects of my life. So I can just, forget about work on Friday at 5, and from there on, it's OmniFocus that's driving things. Or when it's the evening when I get home from work, I can do that. So there's many different ways, I think, of slicing and dicing this. This is where, again, it comes down to the calendar can be very useful. So today I'll be spending a couple of hours working on aspects of the OmniFocus website, and I'm going to be living in Asana during that time. But there's other times where I'm going to be taking care of some admin things, some little details. I'm going to be going to OmniFocus to work on those. So it's the calendar, again, is saying, okay, this is what you're working on now, and then here's where you go to actually get the information that you need to actually move forward on it.
So this is super specific and super tactical. And maybe no one will care about this except me. I don't know. But I'm just curious. So one of the nice things about Asana and Jira as well is it's a web-based tool, which makes it ideal for capturing into something like OmniFocus. How do you actually, and you mentioned earlier that your tasks in OmniFocus, will have a link back to things in Asana.
Yeah, sure.
What's the mechanics for you of getting that? Do you just, go copy the URL to your clipboard, go to OmniFocus and manually enter a new task and paste it in? Or do you use like a plugin, or how do you take that information from Asana to OmniFocus?
Yeah, so this is where one of my favorite services, Zapier. I know we've talked about that on the podcast before too. And essentially, I've set up a Zap that if something's assigned to me, it adds an item to my OmniFocus inbox that I can turn into a project, if that's what makes sense. And then Zapier will also automatically create a link back to the task in Asana. So someone, just by that simple act of, let's say my web developer says, okay, I need Tim to do something. So he creates a task, assigned it to me, and then that'll magically appear in OmniFocus. So I've got that link created automatically. And it wouldn't have been that big a job to do it manually, but it's that little bit of time saving and also the accuracy that creates, where I'm not going to forget about that thing. And I think this is especially key if there's like some people, like I do Asana training and consulting, and some of the organizations I work for, many of them even just live in Asana all day long. That's where they get their work. That's where they have their conversations, etc. But there's others who might go into it once a week, and they might even forget to look at it or check it or respond to messages and things like that. And that's where having kind of a hook into another system that's already got their attention can be really useful.
Yeah, we recently talked about Zapier on the podcast in TPS 282, so definitely check that out. And that is actually one thing, I love that example, and that is such a perfect example of automation, because manually creating an OmniFocus task, or even if you have, say, a Chrome extension where you're looking at a Asana task or a Jira issue and you click the button to create it in OmniFocus, That's absolutely not rocket science, and there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. But like you said, with automation, A, that's one less thing you need to do. And B, you don't have to worry about things slipping through the cracks because you know if something's assigned to you, it's going to appear in OmniFocus. Or you could do the same thing, like you said, with Todoist. That we're talking about OmniFocus because we both use it, but any of these services that have any sort of integration, you can create these links, and it just makes everything more solid and easier.
Another example of that, I've got my LearnOmniFocus. I use the WooCommerce plugin to manage all the e-commerce, and that's got integration through Zapier as well. So if there is a payment failure, then I want to review it, see if there's any contact needed with the client and so forth. And that is set up through a Zapier's app to automatically create a task in Asana to review that person's payment. And it pulls in some of the relevant information, like what the payment was, when it was, and a link to their order, those sorts of things. And that gets me to another point that I think is important. Distinction between a personal and a collaborative task manager is personal task manager is your own space. That's essentially the stuff you've committed to doing. You can organize it however you want. You can use whatever names, emojis, things like that. You can really make it your own. I'm also looking to it. I'm definitely in the place where I could use an assistant. So I'm actually putting things into Asana that maybe I'm doing most of them right now, but ultimately there'll be tasks for my assistant. And that's my way of differentiating the two. And by having that extra layer of automation where those tasks are created automatically, I could be off on vacation. There could be something that happens on the website that generates a task. The assistant takes care of it. And I really don't even need to know about it at that point. So I think that, again, it's not just a time saving. It's just making sure that these things are dealt with in a very systematic way. And if you can have your technology even creating your tasks for you, then I say, why not, Tim?
Absolutely. So it sounds like OmniFocus is kind of like your dashboard. Well, you even mentioned it, is your dashboard for all the different things that you do. So you might have like yoga stuff in there. You might have LearnOmniFocus stuff in there. You might have other things in there. Is it all just kind of like all together, or do you segregate maybe with perspectives in OmniFocus or whatever the equivalent is in other task managers? Do you segregate out your personal stuff, your business stuff, or do you prefer to have it just kind of all together?
No, I definitely prefer to have that separated, and that's what the perspectives are built on. So I might be focused on work, for the morning, and I only want to see work actions, but then I'm taking an hour off at lunch, and maybe I only want to see personal actions during that time because I'm going out to run some errands or something like that. Or I might be I'm getting ready to board a plane and I'm only interested in what phone calls do I need to make before I get on the flight, those sorts of things. So the beauty of any task management system is to be able to slice and dice it and get to whatever list is the most relevant. So anytime in OmniFocus, it's folders. I know in things, there's different areas you can put things into. In Todoist, you can create essentially the equivalent of folders. So anything that tells the system more about what this is a personal project or this is a personal task, and then being able to have it tell you, okay, right now I need to see a list of errands, or I need to see a list of things to talk to Brooks about, or whatever it happens to be, or I'm feeling a little tired Friday afternoon. I'm going to do some admin work because I don't usually need a lot of sort of energy to do those sorts of things. So that's, I think, really the big advantage over pen and paper is just being able to have the system present what's most relevant and give you a short list to work with that's exactly what you want versus a big long list that's going to just create that space of overwhelm.
So yeah, everything we've talked about so far, like you said, could be done in OmniFocus, Todoist, things, whatever people use. It's the general concepts of this integration and segregation between personal stuff, work stuff, team stuff. But I would be very remiss, and I would be falling down on my podcast duties if I didn't ask Mr. LearnOmniFocus about some OmniFocus stuff. It's been a while since we talked about it on the show, which is kind of funny because both Tan, or all three of Tan, myself and Marmel, we all use OmniFocus for our task manager. But I wanted to get some of your thoughts Are there any recent developments? I think the latest version of OmniFocus at the time of us recording is 3.6 or something like that. Are there any recent developments of OmniFocus that have you excited that you're like really pleased with?
Yeah, OmniFocus 3.6 actually just came out last week, so it's a very recent release, and it included a feature that I've been wanting literally for years, which is time zone support. So if I were in Vancouver and I mark a task as due at 5 p.m. today, and then I jet off to Toronto, which is 3 hours in the future, it'll change to 8 p.m., which is maybe what I want, because if it is legitimately due at 5 Pacific time, then it makes sense. It's actually due at 8 Eastern time. But there's a lot of things where I want to just defer this to Monday, and I've flown from Paris to Vancouver, and then all of a sudden it's showing up on Sunday evening instead because of the time change. Well, now you can have something called floating time zones, where you can say, if I say 5 p.m., I want that to be 5 p.m. in whatever time zone I happen to be in. And if that feature is turned off, you can say, I want this to automatically adjust as I move between time zones. So it's really the best of both worlds. There's a time where you want OmniFocus to adjust it for you, and there's a time where you want things to just float around, float with you as you go through your travels in different time zones.
Yeah, that is also the thing that I am super, super excited about, because it's one of the more frustrating things if you use OmniFocus for things like your morning rituals or your evening rituals or something like that. You know, I definitely do that. And there's things I check off every single day. And I was recently in the Philippines, and let's just say my morning rituals were not showing up due at the appropriate time. They were all over the place. So it's something I've wished for forever. So if you are somebody listening to this and maybe you went away from OmniFocus because you travel and the time zone thing was just frustrating, maybe worth, if you miss things like perspectives, it may be worth checking it out again, because to me, yeah, that addition is huge. Any other recent additions or things about OmniFocus you're digging these days?
There's the Omni group are definitely very strong in the automation realm and getting better and better all the time. One recent addition is being able to use shortcuts to create an OmniFocus action, but do it in the background where OmniFocus doesn't even have to come to the forefront, which might not seem like much, but it's one of those things where it makes it that much more attractive to create a shortcut that also creates an OmniFocus action along the way.
Yeah, I have some shortcuts that I use, and I haven't transitioned it over yet, but it does, the task paper thing to create templates and stuff like that. And it's fine. It works totally fine, but it is weird seeing, things flash on the screen as it's going to do its thing. So yeah, it would be nice if it could just take care of it. So glad to see that that's there. How about OmniFocus Web? Have you used that at all? Are you a user of that? And what do you think of it?
Yeah, I think it's off to a great start. It offers a subset of the functionality that's available on the Mac and iOS side of things. I don't actually use it myself because I'm really not the target user. I don't use Windows, which is it's really for people who have Mac and iOS as their primary platforms, but they're in a situation, maybe at work, where they want to be able to access those things, and it's not practical to bring their Mac to work or use their iPad or something like that. So they can log into it through a web browser, and yeah, it's coming along nicely. It'll look very familiar to anybody who's used OmniFocus on other platforms. And I think it does, since there are certain features that are missing currently. For instance, custom perspectives aren't available. I think it needs maybe a little bit of a rethinking of how the system is used, maybe relying on tags more than custom perspectives, those sorts of things. So, but really happy to see that addition, and they continue to develop it. So it'll just continue to get better over time, I think.
Yeah, I'm not personally a user either, because for the same reasons, I'm all in on Mac and iOS, so everything's fine for me. But when I have played around with it, I was impressed how much it looks like native OmniFocus. They did a really, really sensational job with that, I think. Have you had anybody in your community or people you've talked to who are in that situation of using Mac, maybe Mac and iOS at home, but Windows, lockdown Windows at work? Is it working out for them having the web OmniFocus? Have you talked to anybody about that?
Yeah, there's quite a few people in the LearnOmniFocus community that are using it and have been wanting that for many years. And the feedback I've been hearing is very positive. It's been working well for them. Just really nice to be able to even just go in and add a task on their Windows computer. It might be more convenient than grabbing their phone out of their pocket or something like that. And I think naturally those people are also hoping that the feature set continues to grow because you get used to having certain features on the other platforms. And but I think the Omni group did the right thing by starting off with something that provided the essential functionality and just kind of seeing what people wanted the most and having that guide their development moving forward. So it allowed them to get something out sooner rather than later and to have the users really steering the development moving forward.
How about, with your Learn OmniFocus community, how about people coming into the community? Presumably people are coming in because they want, obviously, to learn, like it says on the tin, to learn OmniFocus. Maybe they're trying to master it, get up to speed with it. Are there any kind of common challenges that people are struggling with when they're coming into the community or trying to learn OmniFocus? Or is it kind of all over the place?
I'd say the number one is people have OmniFocus systems that are overloaded. And I guess a close second would be they're just starting to use OmniFocus and they're not even sure where to start. They've got that sort of blank canvas paralysis going on there. But I think that's where people get stuck, not just with OmniFocus, with really any task manager, because it's very easy to create impossibly long lists of things and feel overwhelmed by that. So I really guide people through a process of thinking about their system, not just as OmniFocus, but as a multifaceted system where they've got a place where they keep their notes and ideas. And that's not necessarily the place OmniFocus isn't necessarily the place to put those things. Maybe they start to bring some collaborative systems in place. I see a lot of people who are kind of keeping track of other people's tasks in OmniFocus, and it becomes kind of a big make work project. So I say, well, why don't you use a collaborative system, something like could be Jira or Trello or Asana, any of those, and then just keep your own tasks in there. Just make your system that much simpler. So I think it's a combination of things. Also, I think a lot of us weren't taught productivity skills in school too. So even though the site is called Learn OmniFocus, it's very much about teaching people productivity skills that they could use in any context. And it really helps that everybody is using the same app, or at least has that one app in common, so that we don't have to say, this is how you do it to do this, this is how you do it in things, et cetera, where it makes things feel a lot more complicated. People have that commonality. And there is also a live element to it. We have larger sessions where we have workflow guests on, as well as ones around specific themes, like using it in a team setting, or traveling with OmniFocus was one of my favorite ones that I did. And then we also have these small group office hours, I call them, where there's up to 10 people and they're video conferenced, and they're actually getting to know other people that are maybe going through some of the same challenges, or maybe had the challenge a few months ago and got over it and had a really clever way of surmounting that challenge. So it's kind of maybe a long answer to a short question, but it's but I think the number one thing is just getting clear on what is this tool actually for, and what other elements do I need to bring into my system, and what are the habits that I need to put in place for it actually to work and be successful.
So now that the OmniFocus genie has given us time zones, our greatest wish, is there any other feature or change that you would like to see in OmniFocus in the future? Things that you would hope they'd change or fix or enhance or anything like that?
Yeah, so it's very, very functional app in its current form, but I think there's still a lot of upside potential in terms of new features and ways of doing things. One that I'd love to see is having on the iPad being able to have tags in the sidebar, because I've got a perspective called Today on the Mac. When I see that, I see all my tags on the left, so I can click on phone and I can see all the phone calls on my list today, or I could click on Asana and see all the Asana related activities today. And that's something that doesn't currently exist on the iPad. So that's definitely high on my list of features. On the iPad as well, it'd be great to see more keyboard shortcuts. A lot of people that use iPads have keyboards these days, and I think that does add that extra layer of efficiency, being able to just go through the interface and add and edit things and so forth, keeping the hands on the keyboards as much as possible. I think a third one too, which is maybe a little more ambitious, would be having a different way of viewing the data. I think it'd be really great to have like a kind of a Trello Kanban board view into projects and tasks. And that's one thing I really like about Asana is I can see a list of tasks, but then I can switch it to a board, then I can switch it to a timeline, or I could see it in a calendar view. And it's all the same data, it's just presented in a different way. So having more of a visual sort of way of interacting with OmniFocus, I think would be a real step forward and just give people different ways of looking at their data in there.
Yeah, especially now that they've moved away from context to tags, having a visual way to see things given the tags that you've given to tasks would be, that'd be cool. I never thought about that before, but that would be fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm in constant communication with them. So yeah, definitely pass these suggestions on, not just from myself, but from other people I have contact with, and I've spent many hours sitting down with their engineers and QA and support people and so forth. And one thing that's on a side note that's really cool about the Omni group is all of the different departments work together. So if I go to a meeting and we're going to talk about some new features or thinking of implementing, there's always someone from support, there's always someone from the QA department, from documentation. So it's very much a collaborative. It's not like engineers working off in a siloed environment. They're very much working as a team, because the support person might have insights that an engineer might not have because they're not, dealing with clients all day, or the documentation person might have their own insights into it. So yeah, just very, very progressive, and just a great team of people there.
You and I have both worked in the software industry, so I don't want to speak for you, but I will just say that is not usually the way that it happens.
Yeah, definitely not. Especially at large companies where I think that's even more of an issue.
Exactly. All right. So the first time we met, if I'm not mistaken, is we had lunch. We had lunch at a Japanese restaurant in Kitsilano, and this was years and years and years ago. And you were telling me about this, we were kind of talking about what we do, and you were telling me about this obscure tool that I had barely heard of that you use to use all your communities, and you were telling me all this amazing stuff you were doing with it. And I thought to myself, oh, Zoom, I'll have to check that out. It sounds interesting. I wrote it down in my little notebook. And flash forward now, Zoom is a publicly traded company. Everybody that I know uses it. When I drive around Vancouver, I see Zoom billboards. So it's a huge tool. We're actually recording this podcast using Zoom right now. So you've always been way ahead of anybody that I know about using Zoom specifically, but just this concept of online collaboration tools and using that to build and run a community. So maybe, again, I would be remiss if I didn't go down this road. Maybe you could share some things that you do with communities that you think kind of helps people learn and have a better experience.
Yeah, sure. And I was looking back through my records as I was preparing for this podcast, and it was January 2014. I had my first contact with the folks at Zoom, and I think you and I met shortly after that time. April, I think, was the first email we exchanged. And in those days, almost nobody had heard of Zoom. The company was quite a bit smaller. I was even having hour-long phone calls with senior executives at the company. We were bouncing ideas around and things like that. But it's something that I've been wanting for a very long time. And my first experience with video conferencing went back to when I was living in Ireland, actually in 1997. The company I was working for was involved in designing some video conferencing. And in those days, it was about $13 a minute to make a phone call across the ocean, and the quality was not very good at all. So to see what Zoom was doing, and even you could have a large group of people in a room and it would work seamlessly, was just really got the wheels turning, and it was that sort of dream come true in that moment to say, oh, there's so much that I can do now that I couldn't do previously. So in those days, one of the things I started with is I had these 4-month, I called the Holistic Productivity for Mac and iOS course, and I took people through a 4-month process, and these productivity pods, I called them, were limited to 10 people. And this took them through a journey of learning certain aspects like GTD and OmniFocus and Evernote. And then they actually partnered up with people and went on this 90-day journey where they were making a shift in their life. But the amazing thing is I was meeting with these people from all over the world and actually seeing them. Everyone was on video and interacting and from different parts of the world. And it was just quite magical to get that experience of that face-to-face. And and even kind of in a sense being invited into people's homes and works wherever they happen to be doing the session from, and just get a sense of who they were and their environment and what they had to contribute and so forth. So those are ones that I'm not currently leading them. I need to free up a little time in my schedule to go back to those, but I've got such amazing memories of the human connections I made through those, and I think that's one of the gift of having Zoom and video conferencing. And the challenge that I was kind of experiencing in those days was, how do I scale this? I love doing these small group ones, but what if I have a group of 100 people? I don't want it just to be this kind of faceless thing where people don't get a chance to participate, and they're just kind of absorbing information at that point. But then Zoom brought out this feature, which I'm surprised how few people actually know about. It's called breakout rooms, where you could have 100 people in a Zoom meeting, and you say, okay, I want to give people 5 minutes to talk to their partner, another couple of people. And just by clicking a few buttons, suddenly you've gone from having one meeting of 100 people to 50 meetings of 2 people, let's say. And those people can maybe exchange some ideas, can get to know each other. Have that, even the people who wouldn't necessarily participate in a large group are able to participate in these small groups. And then we come back and maybe go through some more content, and they go back into their breakout rooms. And it's just brought this whole ability to scale and to create that human connection, even if there's a much larger group. So I think the initial offering was really powerful, just in terms of being able to reliably video conference smaller groups, but then the breakout rooms just open up a whole other sort of aspect, whole other possibilities that make it a bit more like being at an actual in-person conference. And even if there's a lot of people, those kind of like the conference we were at, one of the highlights for me was actually meeting some new people and having those face-to-face conversations. So it's bringing that same sort of facility available within our internet worlds and through video conferencing.
Yeah, the reason we switched to Zoom in the first place is we always used to use Skype for our daily huddle. So every day at 9 a.m. Pacific, we just get together, talk about things for 10, 15 minutes, something like that. And we would use Skype, and inevitably somebody wouldn't be able to connect. A couple of people would get kicked off partway through. So we got so frustrated, we decided to try out Zoom, and it's been rock solid ever since. The only time somebody hasn't been able to connect is if part of the team is in the Philippines, so maybe there's been something going on over there. But yeah, the service has been rock solid, and that was just for audio. What we would do is, at the time, we had a monthly video call. So every month the team would be, because usually we communicate audio, but we would be on video. One of the things we've done recently, going back to what you were talking about the human connection and just being able to see people, is we've changed that. So now our weekly team meeting is also on video, and a few other meetings we've switched to video as well. And it has been a huge difference and there's only 7 of us, we're not a huge group, but it's made a huge difference to just, seeing that visual communication. Everybody's more engaged, and we can kind of like hash out things faster. So yeah, these video communication tools, especially with everything going on in the world right now with COVID-19 and all that sort of stuff, it's fascinating watching on Twitter people talking about learning to work remotely. I've worked remotely since 2010, so I'm pretty used to it. But this concept of more and more people trying to learn this stuff is very fascinating to watch.
And I think I remember when I first started using tools like this, people were very shy about being on video, but I think people have gotten much more comfortable. It's a much more natural thing. So I'd say probably about 90% of the calls that I have are actually Zoom video calls. I rarely do phone calls anymore, and occasionally I'll do a Zoom call where the other person isn't on video. Maybe they don't even have a camera, in some cases, but that's a big shift. And it's neat to see. I've been to the past 2 Zoomtopia conferences. They actually have a conference in San Jose, and one thing I saw at the most recent conference, they had an entire wall that was set up as a kind of a portal into a couple of other offices, and it would alternate between, there was one in Texas, there was one in Japan. But this was life-size people, real time on the other side of this video wall. And like one guy was playing golf in there, and you could actually even walk up to the wall and press a button and talk to the person on the other side. And so I think the more the technology advances, the the less we'll even notice that we're using technology. It'll just become a natural extension. And that's, I think, one of the things you were pointing to is having it be rock solid. If Zoom is rock solid, at some point you'll probably won't even pay attention to the fact that you're actually using Zoom. Whereas if you're using another solution where the videos and audio is cutting out a lot, then that really distracts from whatever conversation is going on.
All right. So to wrap up, and I promise this podcast was probably going to go in a bunch of different directions. And here's the one I'll throw in there. In addition to being, super productive, helping people with Asana and OmniFocus and all that sort of stuff, and helping people and working with Zoom, I know that you are also a yoga teacher. Might sound a little left field for some people, because I think a lot of, especially in the past, I think people really thought about productivity in the context of getting more done and, crushing your to-do list and just like wringing every last second out of your day so you can be uber productive. I think that is changing a little bit. I think people are really understanding that there's a connection between your mindfulness, your mental state, being calm. There's a connection there between that and actually making significant progress on the things you're doing versus just like crushing things off your to-do list. You mentioned earlier that you were helping people with, I think you called it holistic productivity. And I'm wondering, is that related in any way to the work you do, say, as a yoga teacher and leading yoga retreats, or are those two totally segregated things that just happen to be that you do them both?
Well, the short answer is everything in my life is really tied together, even though the connections might not be immediately obvious. And I got into yoga in the mid-90s when I was working in the corporate world, and it was definitely helped me to relate to the stresses of my job, and I was getting so much value out of it. I became a yoga and meditation teacher in 1999, and I've been teaching ever since. And I think productivity, at least the way I describe it, is there's some result that's produced. It doesn't have to be work-related even. As David Allen says, if you go to a party to boogie and you don't boogie, it wasn't a very productive party. So it can really relate to anything you want to produce, whether it's, positive health or more sleep at night or anything like that. And I see yoga and meditation as practices that put us into a state that's going to allow us to naturally progress much more effectively and efficiently and so forth. So if I did a meditation this morning right after I got out of bed in the morning, and if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have gotten as much done today. I wouldn't have produced the results that were available. So it's something I spend time on because I know it's going to make me that much more effective. And then the holistic productivity side of things is something I developed literally while going through my cancer treatments. And I was working with a very talented coach at the time, and sometimes I was even being coached when I was lying in hospital beds. And I just really wanted to capture what I was going through in that moment and the process I was going through. And holistic productivity, in its essence, is saying basically as humans, we have many facets, and there's no such thing as life work and personal life and homework, life work and personal work and all those things, and personal life. And there's our lives and with all its different facets. And so something that we do in relation to our health can greatly enhance something that we're doing at work. And sometimes the place where we want to put the emphasis is not the place that seems to need the attention. So when I'm doing my corporate courses, people take on these areas to focus on at the end of the course. They'll often choose something that's, I'd say at least 50% of the time, choose something that's not work related, even though they ultimately want to be more effective at work. So maybe they realize they're not getting enough sleep, or they need to start a meditation practice because their mind's going a mile a minute, or maybe there's a relationship in their life that's taking a lot of their attention away even when they're trying to work. So it's really being willing to look at life and all of its facets and strategically say, okay, where's an area that I'm going to put my attention right now that's going to have the biggest impact across all of the other areas of life.
All right. We always like to end podcasts with action items or something the listener can put into use right away. So if you had to give advice to somebody who came to you and said they were maybe feeling overwhelmed or they had too much to do and just didn't feel like they had enough time to do it in, where would you recommend people start? What should people do to kind of get started on fixing that?
First, I'd share with them that I believe that overwhelm is a perspective on life. It's a mental state, essentially. So it's something that they can shift just through their relationship to what's going on in their life. And I think in order to have that positive relationship to what's creating the overwhelm, at least in their minds, is to be able to look at that stuff more objectively. So if they were overwhelmed with a project, for instance, I might suggest they use a tool like MindNode and actually get all the stuff out of their mind and put it into some form where they don't feel like they need to be holding on. They can say, okay, this is a much bigger project than I thought, or this is actually fairly simple. But at least having that sort of things come into more of an objective sort of realm. If it's someone who's all over the place, it could be as simple as just grabbing a piece of paper and scribbling things down and writing them down and then looking at that list after, or maybe even, going through it with a friend, and the friend's probably not going to have the same sort of drama and emotions around the issue that they are, so can maybe talk to them and say, oh, is this something that you really want to take on, or is now the right time to do this thing, or is there somebody else, or can I help you with this thing, or those sorts of things. So I think it's a combination of putting things into a form where we can see them and involving other people in those challenges, just sitting down with someone, and even if they don't talk, if I just kind of hear myself talk about what I'm overwhelmed about, I find that alone can be very healing. Can realize, okay, yeah, there's a lot of kind of drama, there's a lot of thoughts spinning around that are not really that significant, and it's when I express them externally, I kind of see them for what they are.
Yep, get stuff out of your head. That's the key. We all have too much there. Let's get it out. All right, Tim, thank you so much for being on. If people want to follow the stuff that you do or interact with Mr. Tim Stringer, want to ask you some questions, where should they find you other than Japanese restaurants in Kitsilano? Where's the best place to track you down?
My company website is technicallysimple.com. And if you're specifically interested in OmniFocus, you can go to LearnOmniFocus.com. And I also have a personal website, timstringer.com. That's where I talk about more my sort of yoga and meditation sort of personal areas of life. And then I'm quite active on Twitter as well, @TimStringer.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on. I promise it won't be another 296 episodes before we ask you to come back, but thank you so much, Tim. Really, really appreciate it.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much, Brooks.
At Asian Efficiency, we believe that you shouldn't have to sacrifice your personal life to get stuff done. You should be able to get everything done in the time that you have. That's why we've built a productivity quiz to help you maximize the time you have, increase your energy, and get you more focused. We've helped tens of thousands of people increase their productivity, and within 2 minutes of taking the productivity quiz, we'll show you exactly what you need to do next to increase your productivity. To take the quiz, just go to theproductivityshow.com/quiz. Again, that URL is theproductivityshow.com/quiz. Don't let your never-ending to-do list drag you down, and stop sacrificing your health and family to get stuff done. Take the quiz today and you'll be on your way to becoming superhuman productive. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us an iTunes review or a star in Overcast. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next Productive Monday.